Hey guys, what's up? I've been promising you a video with my thoughts about Lorcana for a while, and since we're now just over a week from release, I thought it was finally time. So, bottom line up front, I think Disney is making decisions with Lorcana that will make it incapable of succeeding in the long term as a TCG. Now, having said that, Disney has already announced 3 expansions after the initial release, so while I think Lorcana has a great chance of ultimately failing, it might take a couple years before they finally pull the plug. Also, I think it's just additionally unlikely to succeed in the long term as a collectible. When you go to your local game store or you have friends over to play Magic, who do you see? It's mostly men, specifically younger men. That's the primary demographic for TCGs, young men, followed by middle-aged men, followed by older men. It's been that way since the early days of widely popular TCGs in the early 1990s, and the reasons go back before that to those being the primary demographics of tabletop role-playing gamers of the 1970s onwards, which itself traces its roots back to tabletop wargamers of the 1950s onwards. Now ask yourself, what are Disney's key demographics? It depends on what part of Disney you're talking about. Marvel movies, despite free-falling popularity in general, still draw their appeal from both sexes and a wide range of age groups. Pixar is mostly geared towards kids, tweeners, and teens, but designed to have token appeal to adults. Disney's cruise lines and theme parks are designed to primarily appeal to affluent families with children. Disney's mainline legacy movies are designed to appeal to children and to adults who originally experienced those movies as children. Star Wars seems to currently be designed to appeal to no one, and Disney Plus streaming service tries to have something for everyone, but it doesn't seem to be working as subscribership continues to freefall. So Disney should be able to reach into its vast vault of intellectual property and pull out something that the core group of people spending money on TCGs will enjoy, right? I mean, yeah, they should. They're not, at least not with the initial release of Lorcana, but they should have been able to. The first release of Lorcana's pre-constructed decks spotlights the characters of Moana teaming up with Mickey, Sleeping Beauty teaming up with Simba, and Cruella de Vil teaming up with Aladdin. Don't get me started on the idea of Aladdin teaming up with Cruella de Vil. Disney is trying to showcase a bunch of strong legacy characters with its first release of Lorcana, but it missed the opportunity to sprinkle in characters from other IPs that Disney outright owns, like Buzz Lightyear and Yoda and Spider-Man. And yeah, we don't expect Disney should have blown its load putting Luke Skywalker and Wolverine in the very first release of Lorcana, but I think they needed to offer up some characters who would have had greater appeal to the TCG market's primary consumers. Moana and Cruella de Vil are not them. Okay, so its main audience is younger men. What do younger men love? Boobs are pretty good, but more generally, beautiful, busty women. That's part of why people are going so crazy over sorcery right now. It has that 1980s low fantasy art style with gorgeous, busty women barely wearing anything. Flesh and Blood's done a great job too, with beautiful female characters in tight-fitting clothes, and even WotC, for all the crap we give them about being prudish, will show some cleavage on their female characters from time to time. Disney, on the other hand, has a couple of problems here. First, they're trying to make this a Disney game with an appearance of friendly wholesomeness. I'm not holding my breath waiting to see Slave Leia as a Lorcana card. Disney has spent the last decade desexualizing women in its movies, from Rey to Captain Marvel, and just Disney as a company is incapable of delivering the kinds of sexualized fantasy characters that we want to see in games. They're particularly incapable of doing it when that sexualization is expected to share space in a booster pack with Mickey Mouse and Moana. But this extends beyond just boobs and attractive women. Lorcana will never be able to deliver the visceral depictions of violence that men want from the media we consume. Flesh and Blood was a breath of fresh air because it had depictions of people getting crushed by hammers and arteries being severed and amputations and all these other forms of gruesome combat. Lorcana just isn't going to have the opportunity to imagine Goofy beheading a defeated stormtrooper. Instead, it's bland and sanitized and lacking the sex and violence that the people chiefly buying TCGs want. So this next point I won't dwell on too long because I made a video all about it several weeks ago, but the gameplay of Lorcana is not original. Its rules are 90% lifted directly from Magic, the structure of the turn, the card types, casting, attacking, etc. There are a couple of game mechanics that Lorcana instead stole from other games, like the inkwell mechanics for paying for actions and individual combat between creatures, but for the most part, Lorcana plays just like a Magic clone, except without the benefit of 30 years of rule refinements, hundreds of keywords, thousands of cards, dozens of play formats, and on and on. You can go watch my previous video about Lorcana's rules, but the bottom line is that I don't see the appeal of a Magic clone that is just going to play like a crappier version of Magic. Kind of lining up next to that is the problem of overall theming. Lorcana is about two fantasy Lumineers competing to more quickly collect pieces of Disney art. That just kind of sounds lame as hell, racing your opponent to an objective instead of, I don't know, killing them? Magic is about two wizards meeting to duel to the death. Flesh and Blood is about two warriors meeting and fighting to the death. Pokemon is about two trainers meeting and battling their stables of Pokemon against each other. Where's the appeal of pretending that you're going to race to collect Disney art faster than your opponent? On the subject of Lorcana as a potential long-term valuable collectible, even if the game does fail, I don't think that's a given that just because it's Disney, people will want to hoard and collect it. There are channels on YouTube where people regularly go to toy stores and show racks upon racks of Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars merchandise piled up and not moving. There really is only so much appetite for Disney products, and again, the folks who normally collect sealed TCG products just don't have a strong overlap with Disney's core audience and the audience they're trying to curate with Lorcana. There are plenty of failed TCGs dating all the way back to 30 years ago whose sealed products you can still buy for very low prices on eBay today. There's no end to the number of superhero trading card sets from the last 30 years whose chase singles sell for the same price today that they did in my childhood, despite 30 years of card attrition and monetary inflation. Let's remember that TCGs as a business are very difficult. Game design in general is hard, and game design in a medium where you ask players not to simply buy a complete game system in one transaction, but to volunteer to join a game's network and continuously pour more and more money in it over time is very hard. Hundreds of TCGs have failed, and I always like to go back to the example of the Alien Predator TCG in the 1990s. Fox Studios owned those franchises' IPs at the time, along with Terminator. They made a game where you could play aliens, predators, colonial marines, and Terminators together in one system. They were the most loved action franchises of the time period with amazing synergistic overlap with the core demographics of the TCG players. And the game failed. And almost 30 years later, you can still buy sealed starter decks from it on eBay without breaking the bank. As always, remember that in the short term, markets are a voting machine, and in the long term, they're a weighing machine. The hype and mania at Lorcana's release might turn out to be huge. The frenzy of Timmy TCG investors hoping to catch Flesh and Blood's lightning in a bottle again might shock us all. There may be a lot of money made on risky bets in the short term, trying to flip boxes of Lorcana. In the long term, there's no doubt that Lorcana will find some people who truly love it, people who adore the IP crossovers, people who enjoy the gameplay, people who want to collect every card, and people who in the coming decades will look back at Lorcana as a defining part of their gaming experience. I'm not saying those people won't exist. I'm saying they won't be numerous enough to carry Lorcana in the long term as either a viable TCG or a valuable collectible. With all of this, I'm not saying I won't buy any either. But the downside risk has to become very favorable because I expect very little upside potential. A TCG can't survive the test of time on speculation alone. It has to resonate with players and be fun to play too. Let me know what you think, guys. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join me on Final Trade. Join the Patreon.